What's up, everyone? Tolly with Durful here, bringing you another 101 cEDH session. This time, we're going to be going over building your commander decks to make them competitive.
What you guys put into your deck does say a lot, but it needs to have a purpose. Like every card that goes into your deck has to do something that fuels your game plan.
Yep. And this right here is kind of like going to go over basically the fundamentals and us discussing not all decks should run certain cards. We all understand with cEDH that the two metas, or two like high tier meta win cons, are Thoracle lines and Breach lines. We're going to tell you right now, not every deck that can run them should run them. Yeah. So, like, for example, not every Izzet deck should run Thassa's Oracle. And not every green deck should run Food Chain. It really just depends on what your game plan is, what your commander's trying to do. Is it a form of acceleration, card draw, kind of some of the things we were talking about in our last video, if you want to go, check that one out. So not every deck needs to run all of those things. Not every black deck needs to run Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact. Yep. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over two different decks each. How to win with them, what ways you can build with them, and then kind of like discuss it from there. See if you guys like it.
So the first deck that each of us are going to talk about are going to be fairly straightforward decks. Something that you can pick up and figure out very, very quickly. Whereas the second decks we talk about are going to be a little bit more complex in how they win. Yep. Namely, just how the lines work, what kind of cards you're going to be going for, what kind of things you're going to be on the lookout for as you are trying to build that deck and figure it out for yourself.
Yep. So let's get started. My first one here is going to be partner decks. Partners is a really big thing with cEDH. The most common one being Tymna and Thrasios, where you could partner with any other partner and it could potentially work out in your favor because of the draw engine it currently has. But I am going for the partners of Malcolm, Keen-Eye Navigator, and Francisco Foul Martyr. Because of Dimir style deck, Malcolm, what he does, flying, whenever one of our pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. And what Francisco does is, again flying, Francisco cannot block, but whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to a player, Francisco explores. Note that neither one of these two pirates say combat damage. It just says damage. So you could actually find ways to deal damage with these guys and be able to apply their abilities. So the main win con I always go for with this deck is Agatha's Soul Cauldron and Walking Ballista. You exile Walking Ballista with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, put the +1/+1 counter on Francisco, giving Walking Ballista's ability to Francisco, and then hope for the best that the top card of your library is a non-land card. If it's a non-land card, you just stick it, you just keep it up top, and you just explore infinite amount of times, and you basically win the game from there with infinite damage. And of course, the other way being blue-black Thoracle Consultation line as like your backup. But with this deck, you mainly want to make sure that you can at least try to go for a turn 1 or even a turn 2 commander play. Search for Agatha Soul Cauldron, Entomb, search for Walking Ballista, and just win the game. That's your main thing for this deck. Very straightforward. Very nice with the colors because you could still add the counters. You could still add all the great tutors that black has. All the mana rocks. One of the main rules that even Play to Win always mentioned, Mox Opal, make sure you run at least 14 to 16 artifacts. This one, since you can create treasures, you could get away with running Mox Opal even if you have like a list of 10 artifacts and you're at 99.
So for my deck, I chose Godo, Bandit, Warlord, which reads, when Godo, Bandit, Warlord enters, you may search your library for an equipment card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Whenever Godo attacks for the first time each turn, untap it and all samurai you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Godo himself costs 6, yikes, but is a legendary creature, human barbarian at a 3/3. Now, whenever we're talking about a mono red commander, you think that there's just this wide field that you need to cover. And Godo is probably the most straightforward commander you could ever possibly run that I've ever encountered. Because the idea is that you need to count up to 11, and that's not a heavy metal joke. You need to count to 11 mana. However you get there, then, there's a support card, like all the mana rocks under the sun, very similar to what Tally was referencing for Malcolm and Francisco. But all of the mana positive rocks, being able to also jam Helm of the Host, because Helm of the Host is what goes infinite with Godo, and Godo can fetch it as soon as you play it.
Yep.
But you don't. But now this is where we were just talking about with Francisco and Malcolm, that you need to cast them as early and as quick as you can. Godo, you don't cast it until you have 11 mana, because you cast it, you drop the Helm of the Host, and then off to the races you go. Like, it's that simple and easy. I do believe you need a haste enabler, so please, all of you Godo stands, don't crucify me in the comments. I understand that, it has to be able to go fast. So, yeah, very simple, very straightforward deck. Like I said, Treasonous Ogre. Why do I mention Treasonous Ogre? It's because it's 4 mana, so it's pretty easy to get up to 4 mana, but then you could pay 3 life and generate 1 red. Guess how much starting life you have in Commander? 40. How much life do you need to make Godo run? 33.
Nope.
I know, because math is a cool thing. 33 life gives you 11 red mana. How about that?
Yep.
So that's why I say it's as you're looking at some of these cards, and I do this at times too when I'm building out a deck, and you look at some choices that people have made, and you're just left scratching your head going, why is that in there? There's always a reason.
Yep.
Now, some of those are going to be flexible spots to deal with particular commanders inside of their respective meta, but a lot of decks that you encounter online that are geared towards tournaments are designed to play into a blind meta. So that's why Godo doesn't really care about anything else. It just wants to go hard on getting to 11 as fast as humanly possible and doing the thing.
Yep.
Very one-trick pony.
Yep. And what really helps too is also Brass Squire. Like, in case Treasonous Ogre gets countered, we've seen gameplays where, just Godo just gets stopped. Like, it just gets countered when it gets casted. So Brass Squire is good to have as a backup to be able to use his ability to equip Hammer the Host essentially for free. And say what Hammer does on. Hammer does on will allow you to essentially equip the helm.
So that's why I say there's a variety of ways to get there, but all of those cards, all of those items support what the deck is trying to do.
Yep.
So when we talk about card selection, you'll notice that we're calling out and highlighting specific cards. But in a lot of cases, if you're just looking at the deck list as a whole, you'll start to, when you think with that mindset, that's what we're aiming at here, guys. We're aiming at mindset. When you're in the mindset of what your game plan is and how do you get there, that's when your card choices become easier. Yep. And yes, I am talking about those of you who are stuck at 101 and can't find that one card to cut. For reference, it's an island. You're welcome.
It's your lands. You should only be running freaking like 25 to 28 lands anyways. So
cowards.
It's your lands.
All of you. Cut your lands. Cowards.
Yep. I even my casual decks, I actually only run 30 lands now since I've been playing cEDH. I don't run 35, 36. Some people running 40. I've actually had people tell me, "What? You only run 30? I run 35." Yeah, how many games were you mana flooded?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think
go away.
I think even in my Marwyn deck, it's only running 26 or 28 lands, and of those, 24 of them are forests.
Yep.
Come on.
Cool. Next up, decks is gonna be a little bit I wouldn't say too much that much complicated compared to Marco Francisco or Godo. This does require some practice to get used to, but it's still on the easier side for beginners, and that's Plagon, Lord of the Beach, or I like calling him Patrick Star because that's what he is. Plagon. When Plagon enters, draw a card for each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. And then you could tap white or blue. Target creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power this turn, which we could just ignore. Unless you have the mana and someone's open, honestly. Plagon. So, I've actually always been interested in building Plagon myself. And from what I've seen, in a way, it is a little straightforward. And one of the things that a lot of people have mentioned in the past, Plagon is one of those commanders you do not want to play ASAP. You want to hold on to Plagon as much as you can until you get those cards that you need to get to abuse Plagon, such as Displacer Kitten, Essence Flux, Ephemerate. Ghostly Flicker, stuff like that. In order to win though, Plagon, you can actually do infinite mana and infinite ETBs to try to win. A way to go infinite mana will be the Hullbreaker Horror and just a bunch of mana rocks. Let's just say, I don't know, Grim Monolith and I guess something that gives like Box Amber. That gives you like some sort of color. And then you'll be able to just like cast, bounce, and then be able to do infinite ETBs and infinite mana at that point. With the infinite mana, you could either choose to cast Walking Ballista for a Googleplex amount of mana, and then just like pretty much kill everyone with its ability, or you could do infinite ETBs with Blind Obedience to abuse the infinite mana as well, so you drain everyone. Very straightforward, but like I said, Plagon is just one of those commanders where you just have to know when exactly you're going to be playing the commander. So the main thing that I've been noticing is you want to make sure, again, first off, have something in your hand or on the battlefield that could abuse Plagon. So let's say you have a grip of just 0 pips, such as Walking or Phyrexia Walker, Shield Spear, stuff like that that has more toughness than like power. Then you cast Displacer Kitten, and for some odd reason, it resolves. At that point, you play Plagon. Then you play Essence Flux. Kitten will trigger first, target the Plagon, Plagon comes back, you draw X amount of cards. Then Essence Flux will resolve, do the same thing. Then you just keep going and going and going until you draw out your library to be able to do the infinite mana or infinite ETB. It does sound like it's straightforward, but the thing is, with the current meta with cEDH, yes, it's gone a little slower, but just like the Godo example, you still want to watch out for those quick wins. Godo can still do it. Rockside can still do it. Like
Atali can still do it.
Atali can still do it. Our last gameplay that came out on Monday. Link is right here. That one turn 2. It's possible. It really is possible to still win turn 1, turn 2. So, with your opening hands with Plagon, you kind of want to make sure that you do have the stack pieces to be able to stop people. Like, ideally, you want to do like a turn 1 Drannith Magistrate or Blind Obedience to slow people down.
Yeah, turn 1 Blind Obedience, man, that'll kneecap anybody in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, even Drannith Magistrate, especially if you're going first. That's just brutal. That literally stops all Rockside players. Because now they have to interact with Drannith Magistrate, which with cEDH, one thing that people will always say, play proactively, never reactively. So it really does slow people down when you do have to interact with something, and it really sucks. But at the same time, with Plagon, it is needed in order to build that board state, and in order for you to win by, like, I would say like turn 4, turn 5, if need be.
Welcome back to mid-range games, people.
2020. We're back to that.
We're back to that. So, for my more advanced deck, a deck that is near and dear to my heart, I've played it a number of times on this channel, KrarkShima. So, for those of you who are uninitiated with the Thumblets, Krark states whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. That part right there has a lot of implications all by itself, which we're going to get to in a second. If you lose the flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copies. That is going to be the crux of your gameplay with Krark and Sakashima. Now, of course, then that begs the question, what does Sakashima do, and what is that significance? You may have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, which, my apologies if I didn't state that before, it's Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. You may have Sakashima of 1,000 Faces enter as a copy of another creature you control, except it has Sakashima of 1,000 Faces' other abilities. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control, and, of course, it as partner. So, the significance here is that you can make a plethora of copies of the Thumbless himself, Krark. Mm-hmm. Now, the significance of that is because you've got to understand a little bit about numbers. I'm sorry, Magic people. I know I just told you all you had to do was count to 11, but now we're going to make it a little bit more complex. And by a little, I mean technically a lot. Because you need approximately, I think it's either 5 or 7 is the break point. I think it's 7, really. But the more copies of Krark that you have, or as we affectionately know it in the deck, the number of times you can copy Krark's trigger, the more likely you are to just go infinite off of the cards that you have. By the way, Ken Bauman's primer has an excellent graphical representation of this number. You never quite get 100%, but I think it's like at 5 or 6, you hit like 97%. Like, you don't really need any more than that, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So that's where you get into cards like Veyron, Voice of Duality, which effectively copies Krark's triggered ability. Harmonic Prodigy, which also copies Krark's triggered ability. Then you get into support cards like Stormkiln Artist and Tavern Scoundrel. Tavern Scoundrel is generating treasure tokens as you flip coins. Stormkiln Artist, whenever you cast or copy spells, is generating treasure tokens. So it's making mana to fuel you playing more cards. So then, of course, what kind of cards do you want to be playing? You want to play instants that generate mana, like Pyretic Ritual or Seething Song, or you want to be generating or the MVP of Krark Sakashima, Jeska's Will, which draws you cards that you can play and gives you the mana to play them.
Yep.
Like, you really can't go wrong. So in Krark and Sakashima, there are many layers to the cards, and a lot of them serve dual purposes. Some will generate mana and draw you cards. Some will simply draw cards while providing protection or some form of interaction. And then, of course, there's the backup lines in there, like Dual Caster Mage and Electro Duplicate, or Heat Shimmer, or Molten Duplication, or Twin Flame, to just poop out a million gajillion Gugaplexes of Dual Caster Mages and then mow everybody down. Like, the deck is very layered. So the card choices seem very off the wall until you start to realize that the whole point is that you're copying and duplicating and getting so much value out of those individual cards that just say draw a card, when you can copy it 50 times and draw half of your deck. That's where it gets interesting. But at the same time, kind of back to something we said earlier, Krark and Sakashima is not a deck you want to run Thassa's Oracle in, because first off, there's no real support for it, right? You think there is. I just told you about copying spells and drawing a whole bunch of cards, right? But at the same time, there's no guarantee that that's going to be how it works or how it breaks down, or that you're going to be able to time your Thassa's Oracle correctly on the stack. So that's where understanding the deck really comes into play. So, of course, Tally, how do you work on when you're trying out a new commander or you're looking at something new? How is it that you approach figuring out some of those things?
Main thing, honestly, what I first do is, admittedly, I do add all staples, which includes the typical win cons, such as Thoracle and stuff like that, because I did do that with Kennen, where I did add Thoracle in the deck, because there is a way to draw your entire library with Thrasios and be able to just throw down Thoracle. But after that, like, what I do is I'll just keep playtesting it. And to me, I'll be like, okay, how often would I be able to do that? How often would I be able to draw my entire library safely? Because here's the thing. People who run blue would run Cephalic Coliseum to be able to beat Thoracle lines. So how can I go around it safely? By replacing Thoracle with Walking Ballista. Because at that point, I'll be like, cool, I'ma just create a Googleplex of treasures with Treasure Vault and, Basalt Monolith. And be able to just keep drawing with Thrasios until I hit a Creature Tutor or Walking Ballista. And then from there, boom. And if people do at that point say, well, I have a response, I want to counter it, I want to do whatever, Mind Break Trap, whatever it is, they'd be like, okay, in response, I'm going to keep triggering, or I'm going to keep activating Thrasios' ability. And at that point, no one has an answer. I'll then be able to pick up my entire library, maybe leave 4 in my library just in case someone has a Cephalic Coliseum.
Just in case.
And from there, I mean, out of the 4, you just hope that none of them are your counters. And then from there, just play all the counters that you have in the deck or in your hand.
So, yeah. For me, how I learn best is by doing. So, of course, that means I've got to put the deck together. I've got to play it. I've got to put in the work, as I like to say. And so there's 2 paths. We will cover this in great detail in another 101 video. Yep. But for the sake of on this one, the long and the short is the 2 ways I like to do it. One is to do a budget build. So, like I said, I'm not gonna go through all the logistics, but like my love for Gitrog came because I was dared by a buddy of mine to do a $250 build. I built it. It won games. And then from there, I upgraded it to the full version of Gitrog. For some other decks, like for Godo, I would tell people, however you're comfortable proxying, I would start by proxying a deck. Please, please, please do not think you have to go out and drop $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 just to play this format. Don't do that. And don't do it on a deck that you don't even know that you like.
Yep. This format is like super okay with proxies. They are pro proxies to the end. Even events are pro proxies. I know in the state of Oklahoma, where I live, you're allowed proxies in events. So it doesn't matter what the anti-proxy says in your play group. Fuck what they say.
Right.
Just play with proxies. Simple.
That's why we say most cEDH players would rather play a good opponent. They don't like your deck is effectively irrelevant to them. It's just the avenue of which you play the game. So, and I say that the last item is if you're kind of stuck in the middle, Spell Table and Moxfield, because you can play test on Moxfield. It is fully formed and functional. So you're going to have all the cards. You're going to have everything that you need right inside of the playtest on Moxfield.
Yep.
And as you have seen on our gameplays enough, we use Moxfield for some of the decks that we build because we don't have the cards for them. You know, I don't expect Towley to go out and drop $900 on a Mox Diamond, or he doesn't expect me to go out and spend $850 on an Underground Sea in order to run the deck. That's just not, we understand that's not feasible. If you're trying to test something, you're trying to figure stuff out, the only best way to do it is to throw it in a Mox field and play test it against others, however you're comfortable. That way you can see how things work.
Yep.
The biggest hindrance to players I find is not they pick a deck and they don't understand how it works.
No, and it sucks, especially once you get into like your LGS and you think that you have something because you saw the Joe Schmo's like deck list that won top 4 or won an event, and you have no idea what's going on, and you just think to yourself, why am I not winning? Practice first on Mox Field, print it out using a printer. Like I have a printer right next to me right here. Print them out, test it out, get familiar with it, and then go into events or play with your friends to see like how good it could be. If you ever want to play with us, if you ever want to play in events with us, or just casually on our Discord, you can play with proxies. We don't care. We don't care if it's written through pen, or we don't care if it's printed.
Yeah, or if you're playing through Moxfield and you're just trying to play test something, which we are going to be looking at adding open play days, so just keep an eye out for that. And yeah. So in closing, the biggest thing when you're picking out your cards is work on your game plan. Guys, you got to know what it is that you're trying to do. Find the cards that support that game plan and understand that cards are going to have multiple slots that they can fill. Yep. So if you feel like this is a combo piece, but it is still valuable outside of that, those are the ideal cards to be picking.
Yep.
There are definitely going to be cEDH staples that you're going to want to be mindful of. I know for me, I keep a list. My list may not be the same as everybody else's, but it is a list I'm willing to share. It is available via my Mox field. So if you follow me, you can find it. And then if you're ever wondering or want to see like, hey, I think I have a good idea, can someone please just confirm if I'm going crazy or not? You can drop into our Discord. We have a decklist review channel. We have all sorts of players who are willing to pitch in and provide feedback and information on your deck.
Yep.
So just check it out.
Oh yeah, and before you guys mentioned, well, what about 3 color? What about 4 color? What about 5 colors? Why did you go with all that? What was it, all mono color or 2 color combination? This is still just a beginner type video. This is the start. Next episode is to upgrade those decks. So not everyone's going to want to keep playing Godo. Not everyone's going to keep playing KrarkShima. Not everyone's going to keep playing Plagon, so on and so forth. So, keep an eye on that. Do hit the bell button to get that notification so that way you don't miss out. But yeah, that is the end. If you do like the video, hit that like button, subscribe, comment down below what you would like us to talk about. And again, just like how Durful and I said, if you want to join our Discord, link will be in the comment section. And it's free for all. Alright, if it's your birthday, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.